Honorable Union Minister for Railways and Commerce, Sri Piyush Goyal ji, the President of our institute, Mr. Balwinder Singh, Vice President Vishwarup Basu, Mr. Dalwadi, Mr. Virendra Sharma, other important dignitaries of the dais, a very good afternoon to all of you. I have been given this very stupendous task of summarizing this 2.5 days fabulous global summit 2020 on the theme Mission 5 trillion US dollars. In this presentation, I have been guided by two very important principles. One, the time made available by the Honorable Union Minister is very scarce for us. We need to make the best utilization of that time. And hence, I would not be making a summing up of the person-wise what each speaker spoke. Instead, I would like to make it more of thematic, connect the views expressed all these 2.5 days to the overall theme and try to emphasize on the takeaways. The second important principle with which I am going to be guided in this presentation is that on behalf of the Institute, I would like to be very honest and frank in the presence of Union Minister of Railways in the sense, if there are demands on this profession and our institute and where we need to create a roadmap for this wonderful mission, we need to tell the Minister that this is what has been the outcome of these 2 days. If we don't say that, and if we don't expect the type of support placed before him, this is the type of support we require for our roadmap, we will be failing miserably. So these two principles have been working in my mind for the last 2 days, and as a result, I have made the presentation into 3 parts. The first part is a diagram, what you see in your screen and in the front of the dais, what exactly we wanted to do in the last 2.5 days. The second part of the presentation, I have overlaid the contents which came off from various speakers, CMAs as well as non-CMAs into a particular template which I will show in the next screen and not now. The third part of my presentation would be what were really the takeaways in the form of the bullet points. Let me first go ahead with the first part of the presentation. Honorable Minister, sir, to set the context of this global summit before you very briefly, the moment we discussed about this theme of this 5 trillion US dollars, we knew that this is going to set the ball in rolling and the intellectual thought processes will start everywhere in nook and corner of the country. And as a result, strategies would be certainly discussed as to how we are going to achieve this and how we are going to race towards this target set by the Honorable Prime Minister. Towards these strategies, obviously, all the stakeholders would be looking for certain levers which will escalate the impact of whatever efforts we are going to take, as it can't be a simple linear pathway. We are going to look at levers, and in that sense, the levers have already been set by the Prime Minister. 3 of the levers we took significantly in these 3 days: artificial intelligence, the startup, and the digital banking as 3 important levers which will be working through the strategies and giving the mechanical advantage, to speak scientifically. As a result of this, the business organizations, whether the organizations are in the business, e-commerce or agriculture, whichever be the sector, they will be moving away from business as usual to sustainable business models, because we also need to keep in mind the sustainable development goals to which India is a party to. And hence the sustainable business models towards these strategies operating through the levers will create new demands on the governance. It can't be compliance oriented. And how the governance is going to emphasize on value creation, that is going to be the order of the day. So in this context, it is not simply looking at the historical past which is going to matter, but really a cost and management accounting oriented thinking, what is going to happen, what is going to be done by us, that is really going to matter a lot for the implementation of these strategies. So in that context, what are all the global practices? Are we having gaps somewhere? We wanted to look at our neighboring countries. We wanted to look at what developed economies are already doing. So we did that. And finally, if we wanted to build the competency into a cryogenic competency, which is essential for the rocket launch to go beyond the gravitational pull, we would have really achieved this path. This is the context, sir, in which the whole theme of this session, the theme of this summit has been well structured into this, beginning with the plenary session and ending with the last session. So in this context, what I am going to do now is, I am going to overlay the whole views which emerged into a particular format. And before I populate that format, let me quickly present to you that format so that you can understand how the thought processes of all these speakers went all these 3 days. And that format is for your benefit as below. The crux of the whole discussion is the $5 trillion US mission was put on the 3 pathways. Pathway 1 is the agricultural sector, which has to reach 1 trillion, the services sector, which is a major chunk of 3 trillion, and the manufacturing sector of 1 trillion. So if these 3 sectors achieve these targets, of course, we are bang on the target. Now, these views towards this, we have put into these 3 segments what you see on the rows. 1, what the government perhaps is already doing, and incrementally what they may be further doing. That again broken in terms of what policy interventions and what policy level decisions have been taken or will be taken. Second, in addition to the policies, what sort of projects some of the speakers felt can in addition government start. This is as for the government side suggestions which came up from this session. The second segment is what the institute has to do in terms of a leadership role, again divided into 2 segments. Are there tools which we need to look fresh and pick up these tools and build these competencies amongst the profession? There could be existing tools, there could be new tools. Both of this we need to build competency in the profession. And lastly, the profession which looks forward to the institute and the government needs to assimilate, absorb this in terms of capacity building, and then in terms of advocacy, tell its clients, tell its members, wherever we are supporting either the agriculture or the services or the manufacturing, let us do this towards this mission. Now, sir, if you look at these different colored points, you can very easily understand the imbalance, slight imbalance which has come. I would not say even a slight imbalance, it's a severe imbalance, very honestly to say. A great deal of work is already being done by the government, both in terms of policy intervention and in terms of projects. And many projects are in progress. But if you look at the institute and the members side, the profession side, a great deal of work has to be done in the domain of agriculture and the service sector. That means there is a chasm between the profession and the institute with one important sector which is going to give us a $1 trillion. And there is another important sector which is going to give $3 trillion towards the mission. A lot has to be done. So what has to be done in this agricultural sector, what has to be done in the services sector, and what has to be done in the manufacturing sector is precisely the crux of the comments which we have picked up last 3 days, and I am overlaying this into this template for all of us to assimilate fast. So I will be going through in the same order. What are all the takeaways in the agricultural sector? The first, the agricultural sector for its race towards the $1 trillion US dollar, all the speakers really endorse the government is doing a lot in terms of ensuring a better pricing for the farmers, but there were ideas that why not we bring in a value-based pricing mechanism. There were pointed references at the end of the day, what is coming as a value added out of a basic an agricultural output, what really the customer gives us a huge realization in terms of per kg or per unit, but what reaches the farmer is a very, very minuscule part of the value creation. So how can a value-based pricing can be brought out and how the government can think intuitively on this and we can give a very good support for such a policy intervention for the government. And here, we would expect a better institutional framework we can go and present to the government. This is how the CMAs can be involved and be supportive of the targets given by the government in the agricultural sector. In terms of projects, there was a tremendous emphasis on training which are outcomes oriented or result oriented for the farm community. Direct benefit transfers, a lot have been introduced for the farmers, but there is further scope for augmenting that. There could be a government-sponsored investments in farm sector, and there were suggestions for rationalizing subsidies. I am giving the bullet points only. The details can be presented. Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So what I would like to add then is, only in terms of the institute, I will only explain in very simple words that there needs to be tools developed from the institute side for understanding the cost and profitability of the agricultural model, and that needs to be disseminated in terms of competency to the agricultural sector. Institute has to play a very major role. And then in terms of competency building by the institute, a very good suggestion came that there is a farm producing organizations. These FPOs are entities available where the institute can play a very major role. So we would request the support of the government in bringing the institute and the FPO together so that we will be able to build the competencies and inform the relevant sector that this sort of competency is available from the CMA community for doubling the farm income. And that is how the engagement can take place between the CMA profession and the agricultural sector. Of course, lastly, there is nothing has been mentioned because frankly, the profession has to do a lot in building capacity in itself and start advocating about the role what CMAs can play in the agricultural sector. The second sector, in terms of the services sector, as Union Minister himself has very rightly suggested, he would prefer me to add to this rather than my repeating this. I would not like to get into this more in terms of details, except that if you take the case of the institute area, a lot of work has to be done in terms of development of new tools and techniques which are focused on the services sector. The emphasis of the profession has been for a very long time a factory-oriented material labor overheads type of cost build-up and the role the management accounting play, whereas the typical business models of the services sector, whether it is financial services or any other services, they take on a different pathways. So how to build cost and management accounting models, a lot of work needs to be done and the responsibility lies on the institute side to develop new tools and take these competencies in terms of advocating that to the profession as well as to the service sector's holders. And in line with this, the profession has to build its capacity in terms of how to mobilize the resources which are now being created towards a favorable deployment in the services sector and support value creation in these sectors. One particular excellent suggestion came from one of the speakers that the CMAs, particularly in practice, need to tell their clients and the service sector how to build models for building gold from waste. So this in turn would also work in terms of cleaning up the environment and reducing and improving the goals on sustainable development in terms of not polluting the environment. So these are some of the important suggestions which came in the service sector, basically giving the gap that the institute has to do significantly in terms of new tool promotion and spreading the message about this. The last part is the manufacturing sector, where a lot is being done already, but what important point I would like to share with the Minister in his presence is that we had two interesting presentations, one from the Japanese costing models and the other one from the Chinese costing model. From the China itself, from the Ministry of Finance, a very senior executive was present to share the Chinese costing practices. Very interestingly, the Chinese costing practices have taken the same pathway what we have been doing in India for quite some time, ever since the formulation of cost accounting standards and cost records. In fact, they were very keen to share the information from us as to how the cost accounting standards have been developed in terms of some of the critical sectors, because they are moving towards industry-specific application of costing standards like us. And the learning for us was, in fact, from how they are moving towards new areas like target costing or application of activity-based costing in the new areas. And in fact, we were very much keeping in our heart the wonderful life cycle costing model which the minister himself has applied in the form of famous LED bulbs example in the railway sector. We did remember that, sir, in your the work you have done wonderfully for us.